Okay. So some quick notes about performance. There's more stuff that will come up as we go along here. So I ask everybody in this room to turn on Photoshop. What else do you have running? Chrome. Anybody else have any other programs running? Chrome is one of the biggest memory hogs in the world. Not only that, it's a data gathering machine. So it knows more about you than you know about you. It probably has your DNA already sequenced. Not that I have any big brother complexes about this kind of shit, but anyway. The problem with it, though, is not the fact that it's stealing all of your data and selling it to anybody in the world who will pay them as much money as they're making. It takes up massive resources, massive resources. The best thing that you can do to speed up your Photoshop is to not run anything that you do not have to have running at the same time. Anybody in this room use Bridge? Well, Bridge is a file searching, yeah, that kind of stuff, whatever. If you use it, that's great, but once you find what you're looking for and you open it up into Photoshop, quit Bridge as well. They're all memory hogs. Memory hogging is the biggest thing that is going to cause your Photoshop to creep. And the more stuff that you have open, the slower Photoshop becomes. How many people in this room have any idea how much available hard disk space they have on their internal computer? How many people know how to find that? Okay, so for the Macintosh people, look up at my screen. I'm going to show you how to do it really quickly. I'm going to go to my Finder. I just pick Hide Others from my drop-down menu under Finder because it just gives me a clean screen. I'm going to close up any windows that I would actually have on here. Control. He said yes. Sorry, really quickly, quick minor detour. So if you get to your desktop, your Finder window here, in my case, I can actually see my hard drives over here. If you cannot see your hard drives, come over to the Finder menu, come down to Preferences. So again, Finder, not Apple, but Finder, Preferences. And in the check marks in terms of what you want it to show, in general, you need to click Hard Disks, External Disks. This is a little aged, but nonetheless, CDs, DVDs, and iPods, and connected servers. You should have all of those visible, in my opinion. But at any rate, when you do that, you'll actually then have your hard drives available. This is a single hard drive. Even though it looks like 3 hard drives here, I've just partitioned this into 3 different ones. It doesn't matter which one you pick. But if you select one of them, don't double-click on it. Just click once and hit Command-I, or go to the File menu and come down to Get Info. That's also Command-I. This little screen will actually open it up. And at the bottom, it will tell you, at the bottom of this top general section, it will tell you the capacity of your hard drive. Mine is a 1 terabyte hard drive. And it will also tell you what is available. I have got 90 gigabytes available. That is too little. The rule of thumb, minimum to have your computer working well, much less working with Photoshop, you need 10% of your hard drive available and free. If you have less of that, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. So if you've got a 500 gigabyte hard drive in your computer, you need 50 gigabytes to be free. If you've got a 250 gigabyte hard drive in your computer, you need 25 gigabytes free. And if you don't have that free, you're going to hate this class. So you need to go in and find, usually the thing that sucks up the most room on computers are video files. That's the first thing to look for. Look for movies, look for any of that kind of stuff that you've actually got downloaded. You need to get it off of your internal hard drive. Make sense? In my case, I've got an entire folder that's probably got close to 100 gigabytes on it called TOS, and I just need to throw it out, but I'm not going to do it right now. Believe me, I practice what I preach. How many people in this room have ever run up against a scratch disk error? All of you, right? And what was your solution? There wasn't one. You were just fucked. You couldn't save the file because your scratch disk was full. You couldn't undo anything because your memory was all full. You simply had to lose the work that you had done. Who wants to do that, especially if you put in the 10, 15, 18 hours worth of work? Oh yeah, I can't save the file. My scratch disk is full. This is where that problem begins. You don't have enough room on your hard drive to be doing the work you need to do. So get rid of the pictures of Fluffy. Lose the video of the boyfriend. He's a loser anyway. Lose the video of the girlfriend. She's a loser anyway. Lose the video of me. No, anyway. Okay. So back into Photoshop. This is what my Photoshop looks like. It's very different than the way I'm sure your all's looks. That's okay. You're going to learn to create this look of Photoshop. This is the retouching space that I've developed over using this for years. It's what every video that you see of this class is going to look like. And I've had people who say, I don't want to use a custom workspace. I can't tell you that. It's very few of them have started out that way, but not one of them has lasted till the end of the semester before they rebuilt this space. So it'll just be much easier for you to work on. However, before we jump into setting this up, the last thing I want to show you is this. If your Photoshop starts acting weird, so weird, what does that mean? Brushes don't seem to be painting the way that they're supposed to be painting. The size is off. You try to hit a keyboard shortcut and something completely different happens. You hit Command V thinking you're going to paste something, and all of a sudden it's opened up, Liquify Workspace. I mean, just weird shit can happen. If that happens, your best and greatest trick is to reset the preferences in Photoshop. Now I'm going to show you how to do it, but I'm going to say do not do it, because if you do reset it right now, it puts you back to the default that Photoshop ships with. And Photoshop ships with a lot of really bad preferences. So it just means you're going to have to go in and redo this all over again. But if you run into this problem and Photoshop stops working for you, you need to know how to reset it. So this is how you reset it. Quit Photoshop first. So I'm just going to come up and quit Photoshop. Please do all of this stuff with me. I can't stress how important this part is. Then there's two different keyboard shortcuts for this. The first keyboard shortcut, if you are on Windows, this is the one or the few times I'm going to ask you to write something down. If you're on Windows, you hold down the Alt, Control, and Shift key and then start Photoshop. If you're on a Macintosh, you hold down Option, Command, Shift. So hold down Option, Command, and the Shift key, and then launch Photoshop. And when you do, you will get a dialog comes up and says, do you want to delete Photoshop settings files? You would say yes if you are having trouble. Do not say yes right now, because you're not having trouble right now. So in this case, we can hit no, but this is how you would get to it. Did everybody actually end up with this dialog? Quit Photoshop again. Oh, you got like what? That's because you're opening Lightroom. So Photoshop, not Lightroom. That's Lightroom. That's also Lightroom.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
That's all right.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, you're all right. You're all right. You're all right. Calm down. It's okay. It's okay. Come up here to the Apple menu.
Yeah.
Come down to Force Quit. Good. Pick Lightroom. Say Force Quit. Perfect. Go over here. You can close this up. Go over here to your applications. Good. And find Photoshop. It's probably going to be at the top. Yeah, that'll work. Oh, it's finding you every Photoshop file. You don't want to do that. Go back to applications. Scroll to the very top. It's just it's alphabetized. And right there, double click on that. Okay, this is it. Don't double click yet. Hold down Option, Command, and the Shift key, all three, and launch Photoshop. You probably had to keep holding those keys down.
Okay.
That's okay. But anyway, you'll get that warning will come up, and you just say yes. Okay. Say what? Okay, so no. Yeah, well, it's easier to do it because then you hold down these three. No, this is the shift key on this side over here. And then double click on Photoshop really quick. And it says it right there, so hit no. All right, so I'm going to hit no as well. Okay, has everybody got Photoshop open? I see a couple of people are, so go ahead and hit no. You do not need to reset those preferences, and go ahead and let Photoshop continue to open up. Okay. So we're going to set up Photoshop the way I think it should be set up, but I will tell you this right now. I'm going to tell you why I'm going to make the changes that I'm going to make. But you guys, this is your space. You get to do anything that you want to actually do with this. So I'm going to tell you why I do what I do and suggest that you do the same thing. But if all of a sudden there's something that you like much better, the way this works, whatever, embrace that. You don't need to do it all the way I'm doing it. I'll try to convince you, but you're on your own. Are we good about this part? Okay, so to start with this, come up to the Photoshop menu and come down to Preferences across to General. In Windows, it's at the bottom of the Edit menu is where you get to your preferences. All right, so does everybody have this thing opened up? And it's just a long list of, you've got tabs on one side that are different possible panels that we'll look at, and then the actual result that's sitting here in front of you. Is everybody good on that? Got this part? And we're going to start with General up at the very top. So I'm going to talk to you about the things again that I would change and the reason I would change them. And the first thing I would do is I would uncheck this Auto Show Home Screen, because that's nothing but an advertisement for Adobe. They open that shit up. Now, if you love that splash page on the home screen, but for me, I feel like I'm being sold shit, and I hate that. So I don't like the home screen, so I uncheck that part. Use Legacy New Document Interface. I do enable that. The old version of how to create a new document was much better than the new improved version that's tied into the shitty home screen. If you love the new dialog box, how you create a new blank file, go ahead and keep it. If it was me, I would go back to this Use Legacy one. It's the one I use all the time. You also need to check Use Legacy Free Transform. This gets really critical for us when we get into doing compositing. Again, when we try to scale in perspective, which is way above where most of you should be right now, but when you try to do that, you need a certain specific way the transform tool works, and the legacy version works and the new version does not. Beep when done. If you've got a filter that takes 20 minutes, you want your computer to scream out to you and say, okay, I'm done. Uncheck Export Clipboard. This is one of the biggest memory hogs that there is in the world. And nobody, I promise you, nobody copies image content in Photoshop and then tries to take it to another program. You would save a file in Photoshop as a JPEG or something, open it up in a word processor, but you would never do a copy and paste. You will grind your machine to a halt. Way too much memory. That's unchecked. The rest of this can stay at its defaults. The next little tab down, Interface, if you click on that, you can actually change the overall structure of the interface. You can, for instance, you can make it a very light interface like this. The problem with this is that this will pervert the way you perceive color and tone on your workspace. So to have this really light background like this will give you a very it impacts your eyes. What happens is your eyes will automatically look at the lightest thing on a screen and color balance that. If it's in your image, that's great. It works for you. But if it's the interface of your screen that's done that, this may have a different color than your image has, yet this will set the color for you. So I typically want to use, I don't use the black one, because the black one, it gets to be really hard to see. This one, if you click on the black one, it gets to be hard to see certain things when they come up. I use the sort of the next darkest image here. We'll talk about why that is in just a minute. In terms of all the standard screen stuff, I leave all of this at its default. You can also change the language. This is where you would change your UI language. If you're more comfortable working in a foreign language or a different language, that's fine. Go ahead and pick it here. The font size, it's hard to believe that Photoshop is actually getting their shit. I mean, look at how small this 8-bit is. So is that ridiculous or what? You can try to set this so that you get a higher, a bigger UI font thing, so you can go to large here, but I've never see it change anything. So anyway, it is what it is. The rest of this can actually stay at its default. The next one down, workspace, this one does matter hugely to me. So I'm going to tell you why I make the changes I do here. By default, open documents as tabs and enable floating document window docking are both checked. What this is that if you open multiple images in Photoshop at the same time, so let's say you select 2 files and just click open or drag them on top of Photoshop, they will open into Photoshop as tabbed spaces. You'll see one image, it'll be the tab that's open, and then there'll be another tab at the top. And if you have 3 images, you'll have 3 tabs. 4 images, you'll have 4 tabs. If you are comfortable in working with that, that's great. But a lot of times when we are working in compositing, we've got multiple images opening and we are trying to drag elements from one image to another. And if you, for me again, I can't remember that my file has got some obscure long letter number name, whatever. I don't know what file that is, but I can see it. So if I turn off the tab behavior, I've got a bunch of floating windows, which a lot of people would hate. But for me, it allows me to pick exactly the one I want as my source and drag an element exactly to the one that I can see as my destination. It just works better for me. This enable document, the docking part, what that is that if you have tab behavior existing and you grab your image that is floating out and you drag it up close to that top menu bar item at the very top of Photoshop, it will then become a tab. Again, I don't like tab behavior, so I shut it all down. You guys can do what you want. I'm just telling you, when we get into compositing, you will ultimately revisit this and turn this stuff off. Next thing down to tools. I don't like the rich tooltips. So what a rich tooltip is that when you hover over any one of your tools, it'll drop out and it'll give you a little video about how the tool works. So if you're learning tools right now, if you don't know them, this is possibly a good thing to keep on because it'll give you a quick little demonstration and you can just see. If you're familiar with how the tools work, this is just another thing that takes up, it hides shit, stuff flies out, flies back in. It's just not something that I need or want, so I turn that part off. The rest of this going down here is all on and or off by default. Create a snap. The rest can actually stay exactly where it is. Oh, wait a second. I want to look at one thing here. No, okay. Down. Yeah, shoot.
Some of them in default is on. It's different from yours.
It looks like all of yours are on, right? Yeah, this was my old version. The only thing in here that I would say that you should definitely turn off is rich tooltips, as long as you know the tools. The rest of it you can probably leave on without worrying about anything else on here. Yeah, because it's not a lot, unless you get into scroll wheels and mice and that kind of shit, whatever, then none of this is, the rest of this is going to matter. History is the next one down. Why would you use history? So in order to use history, click on the thing that says history log, and it'll actually make these items available to you. And you have options in here. The first option is that you can save your history in the metadata of the file. Now this will work for anything but a raw file. So it'll work for a JPEG or a TIFF or a Photoshop file or any other file, whatever. What this does, when you say the log items that you want to put into history, if you click on this drop down, you have session only, concise, or detailed. You have metadata, text file, or both. So what this is that with it set up the way it is right now, to say session only metadata, what it's going to do is it's going to record every time that file was opened or closed in Photoshop. That's all it does. Verser opened it on this date, it'll timestamp it and close it, and that gets put into the metadata of your file, and you can actually do a get info and look at the metadata of the file. Nobody cares about that. If you click on the drop down concise, what concise will actually do, again, we're going to put it into the metadata only, is that it will do the opening, closing, and then any tool that's picked. Also not a use to anybody. Detailed. Anybody in this room ever consider a career in retouching? Would you ever do it? If I came to you and said, okay, I'll pay you $1,000 a day and I'll book you 4 days a week, would you do it? Yeah, right? I mean, there would be some reason to actually, so you need to, even though you may not see this as a possible career, don't shut that part out. Think about that in that sort of sense, okay? So what detail does is this. It's every time anything happens in Photoshop, every time the file was opened, every time it was closed, every tool that was picked, but everything that was done with the tool. Stroke 1, stroke 2, stroke 3, stroke 4. The detail images of where it was stroked on the, they'll actually do a pixel map of your image. Where did that stroke happen on the image? What color was actually picked to do that? It's everything. If you do this for one of your files, a typical file that you retouch, you will be shocked at what results from this. It's something you don't want to put in the metadata. It's way too big. So instead, what you put here is a text file. And if you click on text file, it'll open up a window and say, okay, where do you want to save this text file? What do you want to call it? You name this file the exact same thing as your image so that you can keep the work that you've done, your history, with the image, so that there is a different history for every single individual image. And then when you actually take the work that you have done, the retouching work that you've done for a client, and you present it to them and they say, okay, yeah, I know I agreed to pay you $2,000, but this doesn't look like $2,000 worth of work to me. I'm going to pay you $500. And that's when you pick up your text file that's now the size of this book, phone book, and you go, that's why you're going to pay me, motherfucker. That's what I did to your goddamn image. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, but it's the justification for what you did. And believe me, somebody looks at that, they're not going to say, oh, yeah, no, that's only $500 worth of work, whatever. Okay, yeah, sorry, here's the check. See, that's why you're in this class. It's all those secret little conniving tricks. At any rate, we're going to cancel out of this because you do not need to keep a history record for this class, so I'm going to uncheck that and go to the next one down. File handling. I pretty much leave this all at its defaults. If you continually get a message that comes up when you're trying to save files, do you want to save it as being the most compatible? Do you guys get that message? If that keeps coming up, whatever, you can actually say up in here that you always want to enable the allocation, lowercase, default, compatibility. Yeah, it's this compatibility part right here. You would actually, yeah, these are all set up to already to be, this part you shouldn't be getting that error message still. But maybe the most important thing that we're going to set up in this thing right here is underneath the sort of second column to the right where it says automatically save recovery file information every. You should put a check mark there and drop down menu and do 10 minutes. What this will do is this will actually save a version of your working file because you were too lazy and stupid to actually save as you were going along, and all of a sudden your computer crashes and you think, oh my God, I've just lost that last 6 hours of work because I didn't save that file. This thing will actually, the minute you reboot Photoshop, it will open up and it will say, would you like to open up the recovered version of that file? And you say, yes, I would. And then you save it. Oh, I know. And why this isn't on by default? Would somebody explain that to me? Why wouldn't you want that protection? Somehow I think Adobe's figured out a way to make money off of it, but at any rate, default file location. How many people here, when you do your work, Alec, are you only doing saving stuff up on the cloud? Or do you work local? Okay, so if most of the time you guys are getting, when you first started the latest versions of Photoshop, it wants to save everything to the cloud. And again, it's an Adobe hack. They are trying to push as much cloud storage on you as they possibly can, and at a certain point they're going to start charging you. And it gets expensive quick, just so you know. I'm not trying to talk you out of doing it, I'm merely saying So if you want your stuff to be defaulted to actually saving to your computer, it's changed right here. In this drop-down menu, instead of saying Creative Cloud, pick on your computer. And then the default dialog box will not be, do you want to save to the cloud? You can change it when you save, but if you're not saving anything to the cloud or you're only doing it occasionally, you want this to go onto your computer. The rest of this we can leave where it is. The export dialog box, I don't change this. There's actually, I use an older version of, or not an older version, a legacy version of exporting stuff that we will look at later on. So I'm going to leave this pretty much exactly where it is. Performance, this one matters here. So how many people in here have any idea how much RAM they have in their computer? How much?
64.
You have 64 gigabytes in that computer? Then when you open up this, how much is in yours? 32. So for the people who've got the 64, the 32s, if you've got 16, which is what I have, I wouldn't touch this. But if you've got 32 or you've got 64, whatever, you can bump this amount significantly up. You can't take it up to 100%. So what this is saying is, how much RAM that you have are we going to give to Photoshop? How much memory are we going to have? Now again, if you're running a Chrome browser while this is going on, 3 or 4 gigabytes of your memory has been sucked up by Chrome, at least. So again, if you've got 16 gigabytes in your computer of memory, Chrome's got 1/3 of them. It cripples you here. But for you guys who've got that really big stuff, the default is 70%. You guys can easily crank that up. You need to leave like 10 gigabytes. I would leave something like that, or 8 gigabytes. Leave 8 gigabytes free. But you can crank up the rest of that to really leverage. Again, Photoshop will be much more responsive and much faster for you. So you can bump it up to the 80, 85, somewhere 90%, somewhere in there. You'll get a sense of what it's going. If you've got 64 gigabytes, you can really crank it up. You need to leave some overhead for the computer just to work. The computer needs, the Finder and all that kind of stuff. It needs other stuff to be able to work. Yes?
What about 24 gigs?
So if you've got 24 gigabytes, again, what I would leave is probably 5 or 6 available for the system, and then grab the rest for Photoshop. But again, remember, when you're doing this, don't be running anything else that's going to take up memory. Anything. I'd shut off all my other programs. So when I'm going to an intensive Photoshop session, I calibrate everything, and then I shut everything I possibly can off. If you need to listen to music, grab your phone. Anyway, the other defaults in here we can pretty much leave, especially this history states and cache levels. We're going to talk about a way to finesse more history out of this. Well, it's not going to be out of this part right here, but a way to actually extend what history will actually really give you here. But at the time, for the most part, we can leave this at 50 history states and 4 cache levels. Next one down, image processing. In this case, sometimes people have issues in doing image processing if they're using an external card on this, although this is not where it's looking like it's actually happening. Let me go back up to here. No, it's this one right here. So let me finish getting through. I just went back to the Performance tab. It's this Use Graphics Processor. Use Graphics Processor. You want this enabled. It will actually know what processor you have. However, have any of you been working in Photoshop and all of a sudden your screen starts to break apart? It looks like, those puzzles that are like little squares that you move around? It's almost like, it's not really Tetris, it's more like the slidey number things, whatever. Have you had an image that all of a sudden breaks up into those tiles? If you do, it's usually a processor problem like this. The same thing can happen in Liquify. How many people in this room are already working with Liquify? So you can get into Liquify and you will actually, things will start to happen that are just completely unpredictable. And it's like you think this is going to happen and it goes in that direction. It's because of the processor card that you have in your computer. You can temporarily disable that to do your work in Liquify, but otherwise you have to come into here and turn this off. Again, it's a pretty rare problem. It's getting more and more rare, but it happens. So that's where you would actually deal with it. Image processing, we can leave just where it is. Scratch disks. How many people in this room know what a scratch disk really is? Yeah, the thing that's bitten you in the ass all the time and you never bothered to Google it and say, why is this thing taking me down? Huh. All right, you are not going to see this on the computer screen. You will still hear the audio of this, but we're going to do a really quick lesson in how computers work. Well, we're going to try anyway. This is my computer. I'm going to do mine with 4 gigabytes of RAM. That's what these are right here. This is RAM. This is 1 gigabyte, 1 gigabyte, 1 gigabyte, and 1 gigabyte is right here. I've got an external hard drive that's sitting over here. And on my hard drive, I've actually got my image data. So this is my image. And it's also 1 gigabyte. And it's just sitting on my hard drive. So the whole thing about how Photoshop works is this. It takes your data, that is your image, it brings it into Photoshop. Photoshop allows you to manipulate that data and then save it back to your hard drive. And that's basically it in a nutshell. So if you had thought of that 30 years ago, you would be worth billions today. Yeah, I didn't think of it either. But the way Photoshop works to actually make these changes is this. The first time you launch an image into Photoshop, you double click on it to launch it. It reads this gigabyte information right here. It reads it off of your hard drive and it loads it into the first RAM slot. Does that make sense, everyone? And then you just see the image. Right? But then you're going to make a change. So let's say we add an adjustment layer on top of it. Well, that's a change in history. And what happens is, I'm going to erase these right now just so that I've got place to actually work on this. But remember, these are all the gigabyte. This is just 4 gigabytes. What ends up happening is that this becomes state number 1 right here. What happens when I make a change is state number 1 actually gets written into the next RAM slot down. So this becomes state number 2, the current state, and this is now state number 1. And this was what gives us history and the ability to go back, or the ability to undo. Does this make sense to everyone? Okay, then I'm going to make another change. I throw a curve on it, and I do something wild with the curve. Well, this top one becomes state number 3. This second one is state number 2, and this bottom one now is state number 1. And it just keeps laddering down like that. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, we have 50 states enabled. That's what we actually set up in the history thing right here. But I've only got 4 possible states here. How can that be? Well, this is what happens. So I'm going to do this one more time. And it puts in state number 4, state number 3, state number 2, and state number 1. But then I'm going to go to my 5th state. So this is going to be the 5th state here. This is the 4th. This is the 3rd. This is the 2nd. What happens to the 1st state? We still need 50 available to us. So what Photoshop does is it takes that 1st state and it writes it back to the hard drive. And it sits right here. This is now state number 1 right here on your hard drive. That is what scratch disking is all about. So what happens is Photoshop creates an invisible partition on your hard drive, and it starts writing these history states to that partition. Now, if you need to go back in time, you can do that, but this interchange, this exchange between electronic memory and hard drive stuff, it takes time. It slows things down. But that's not really the bigger issue here. The bigger issue here is keeping these history states available to you. Does that make sense? So then let's say you do want to go back to your very first state. You actually go through your history panel, or you do multiple undos, and eventually it'll get back to this state right here, and it will then write this. State number 5 goes to here. 4 goes to here. 3 goes to here. 2 also gets written right here. And 1 gets loaded back into the top. And that's how you see where you started from. That's how this whole history operation actually works. Does that make sense? The problem is you've got an invisible partition on your hard drive right here that is growing. Every single history state adds another gigabyte to this. And that's when you run into your scratch disk is full, we've got nothing else we can't do. When you've done this long enough, your hard drive fills up completely. It's an invisible partition. You may say, well, I've got 100 gigabytes of available space on it. It doesn't matter. This thing continues to grow. The only way you get rid of this is quitting Photoshop. Then this invisible partition goes away. But you can watch this actually happen. If you put a monitor on your hard disk size, as you are working in Photoshop, you will see that number just start to go down and down and down and down and down because of this scratch disking. We good on this part? This is why you have to have available space on your hard drive, on your internal hard drive. However, if you don't want to go down that road, there is a solution to this, and it exists right here. I've got 3 partitions in my hard drive right now. I'm not going to do those. I'm actually going to plug in an external hard drive. We're going to get through preferences, guys. We'll take another break. So I'm going to plug in a hard drive right now. It's probably not going to show up here while because this window needs to be refreshed. But let me just make sure it's loaded. Yep. And I'm going to go back and then back here into scratch disks. I'll just come back into preferences again. And you can see this is the hard drive right here. You can actually enable an external hard drive to be your scratch disk. To do it, you would click on it. If you want it, these things will use in the order that they exist right now is how they're used. So my Macintosh HD is going to be used first until it completely fills up, and then my data backup 2 will be, and then on. So if you want this to be your scratch disk, you select it like this to be your first, and then you actually pop it up to the top like this. Right now then, if I actually were to say OK to this and restart Photoshop, you have to restart Photoshop in order for this to take effect, then my external 1 terabyte is going to be my scratch disk from this point on. So if you were to tell me, well, okay, I could get 10% free space on my internal hard drive, but that was it, I couldn't get anything else, then this might be a solution for you. Make sense? All right, I'm going to cancel that because I'm not going to do that. We're almost done, guys. Cursors is the next one down. In the cursors for the next one down, you want to make sure you've got normal brush tips selected. You also want to enable the crosshair in the brush tip. We do very precise work here. Nobody's going to work with something that looks like a little paintbrush. We all work with these circles that have a cross in the middle to show you where the center of it is. In terms of the other cursors, I know that you are going to hate to see this go away. All of you wants to use the little bucket for the fill or the little whatever. You need precise, or the clone stamp tool that looks like a little stamp or all of that. No, not in this class. No, not ever again. You want to select precise for your other cursors. All you get is little circles with a dot in the middle. And then you can leave your brush preview. Mine's just, this is for the heads-up display. The default red is fine on this. Transparency and gamut, this is a huge one for us, so it matters. By default, this color is a middle gray that no one can see whether you're working on a black and white image or a color image. So you want to change that to an electric color that you can't miss. To do that, simply click on the color swatch and a window will open up. And in the RGB values, so the radio buttons that are sitting right here, if you simply select the R value, so I'm just double clicking, type in a 0, hit the tab key, it will take you down to the green space, type in 255, hit the tab key, and in the blue color space you want to put 0 again. This gives you a pure green, and then simply say OK. It's extremely easy to see. In terms of the units and rulers, not that this matters as much. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. In your graphics work, do you guys try to get your screen so that it is real scale size? Most people don't. But if you want this to be real scale size, this screen resolution of 72 pixels per inch goes way back to LCD, CRT screens, like the big things, giant TV that's really deep and gets really high. It goes back to those days. All the screens that we work on now are radically higher in resolution. If you want your resolutions to match up a little bit more or to make a little bit more sense, what you can do is you can actually measure the width of your screen. So actually measure how wide your screen is. My screen is, I've done this before, it's around 11 inches. Come up to your Apple menu. Come down to your system preferences. In system preferences, pick displays. In displays right here, you can see. I just want to make sure you can see both of them. This is the display for my the current laptop screen that I'm working on. This other one that's behind it is the projector. So, but in this one, actually, if you pick displays and click on this drop down to optimize, nope, I take that back, scaled. Click on scaled, you'll actually, if you hover over the text, you can see that this is a default. It'll give you the pixel dimension right underneath it. This is 1,440 pixels wide by 900 pixels tall. That's how tall my screen is. If you then measure the width of your screen, you just divide it into that number. So 1,440 divided by 11, which is the width of my screen, equals 131 pixels. So basically what that means is you put 130 into here, and your screen resolution will be closer. This doesn't necessarily matter to us. It's not like you get anything more or anything less. It's just that if you go to 100% of your image on your inside of Photoshop, then 3 inches will look like 3 inches as opposed to not. That's all this is. And the rest you can actually leave exactly where it is. We're almost there. We've got one last thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Our preference have been set, but you would think that color space would be a preference. No, Adobe wants to mess with you there. So in Macintosh, and again, for the Windows people, I think this is also in the edit menu as well. Do you have color settings at the bottom of your edit menu? Yep, so that's where we're going right now. For everyone else, edit, this one's really important, color settings. By default, this is exactly how Adobe Photoshop ships. This is give the baby in the crib the hand grenade and see if it pulls the pin. This is the most fucking dangerous dialog box in Photoshop right now, because what this says is, let's say you've been working on your great file that's got a really deep color space, Adobe RGB or ProPhoto RGB, and everything's going great. And then you decide really quickly you need to open up your image on my computer, the way it's set up right now, to do something really quick just before you turn the file in, and you save it. This will throw away half of your color. This will dumb your color space down to sRGB, and it won't tell you that it's done it. It won't give you any warning that it's done it. So it's a shitty color space to begin with, and then there's no warnings about you fucking up your file. Huh. That's what we'll ship with. I think that's a great idea. Can see all the people at Adobe. Half of them are just saying, how much more money can we make doing this? I don't have a very fond feelings about it. Anyway, so you need to change this. The easiest way to change it is in the drop-down menu. You change this from North American General Purpose 2 to a very original North American Pre-Press 2. Could they get them to be closer in language? You know, why don't give me something like I know is different, right? But at any rate, if you pick North American Pre-Press, you will see that it changes your working space to Adobe RGB. It then turns on all the profile mismatch warnings so that when you do that same move that I said before and you try to save a file, you open a file into this computer that's in your beautiful color space, this will at least tell you, oh, this color space is different. You have a problem here. What do you want to do? It doesn't just leave you hanging and fuck up your file. Are we good on this part? While we're here, how many people in this room are working in Adobe RGB as their color space? How many working in ProPhoto RGB? How many people have any idea what that means? Okay, so go ahead and say okay to this. One last thing we need to do. I take it back. We won't do that now. We'll do that actually later. Okay, so I have got, we'll call this 330 even. Let's make this a hard 10. So if you guys can be back at 340, that'd be great. We got a lot to do today.